Since childhood, you've been trained like a loyal pet, praised for obedience, punished for defiance. You were told that being nice is noble, that being humble is holy, that being selfless is moral. But what if none of that is true? What if those values you call virtues are not signs of strength, but symptoms of domestication? Nietzsche did not whisper. He roared, "What was once called evil is now called virtue. What was once noble is now seen as arrogant. What was once powerful is now condemned. You are not free, you are conditioned, taught to call weakness kindness and fear compassion, taught to shrink yourself and call it good. This is not a moral critique, this is a spiritual awakening. How virtue became a cage. Once, virtue meant something else. It came from the Latin virtus, from vir meaning man, force, strength. Virtue was power, excellence, fire. But over centuries that fire was doused, rebranded, rewritten. What was fierce became meek. What was noble became servile. What was wild became domesticated. The powerful threatened the weak, and so the weak rewrote the rules. They said, power is evil, humility is good. And just like that, a new morality was born, not from truth, but from strategy, a psychological strategy of the powerless to protect themselves from those who dared to shine. So when you are told to be good, what are they really saying? Be tame, be predictable, be small, not for your sake, but for theirs. The war between strength and moral conformity, Nietzsche saw morality not as eternal truth, but as a battlefield. A war of interpretations, a war between those who create values and those who submit to them. At the heart of this war lies one conflict, strength versus conformity. The strong do not ask for permission. They do not dilute themselves to be liked. They create, assert, act. But in a world ruled by herd values, this is threatening. So the world punishes strength with shame. It brands individuality as arrogance, passion as selfishness, ambition as vanity, and it rewards obedience with virtue signaling. Look how selfless you are. Look how humble. But humility is not always virtue. Sometimes it is fear dressed in grace. And fear, Nietzsche warns, has become the silent author of modern morality. The fear of excellence disguised as humility. Have you noticed how the world celebrates the average, how it lifts up the unthreatening, the agreeable, the passive? We are taught to look down on those who dare to say, I want more, I am powerful, I will rise. Nietzsche calls this the hatred of greatness. True excellence stings the eyes of the mediocre, and so to protect their comfort, society builds altars to false humility. But humility, when unearned, when demanded, becomes a leash, a sedative, a tranquilizer against the chaos of the truly alive. When someone brilliant downplays their light, we say, how virtuous. But what we really mean is, how convenient for us. It is not humility that is virtuous. It is honesty about one's power, wielded responsibly. That is sacred. Goodness as a tool of the resentful. At the center of Nietzsche's fire is a single idea, resentment. The weak, unable to act on their anger, transmute it into morality. They say, I cannot dominate, so domination is evil. I cannot be free, so rebellion is sin. This is not peace. It is inverted violence. It is envy disguised as ethics. It is the wounded man rewriting virtue to hide his wound, and we inherit this poisoned morality like a virus, repeating the commandments of the resentful, believing we are good. But Nietzsche's voice rises through the fog. Good for whom? According to what values? And who benefits from your obedience? You were not born to obey. You were not born to be nice. You were born to become. So the next time someone tells you to be good, ask yourself, are they nurturing your strengths or neutralizing it? Because if goodness is just fear in disguise, then it is not virtue. It is submission. Nietzsche's diagnosis of resentment. There's a kind of sickness in the soul that pretends to be virtue. It smiles politely, but underneath, it seethes. It applauds the meek, not because it admires them, but because it resents those who aren't. Nietzsche gave this sickness a name: slave morality. It is the morality born not from strength, but from woundedness. It does not rise, it recoils. It does not affirm, it negates. Where master morality says, this is good because it is powerful, slave morality says, this is good because it is not powerful. It reverses values. It praises what is passive. It elevates weakness to a pedestal, not out of compassion, but out of revenge. This morality does not want to create the noble. It wants to eliminate the noble by calling them evil. So the noble spirit begins to die, not from battle, but from silence. The transformation of weakness into moral superiority. Imagine this inversion. A man who cannot fight calls violence evil. A woman who fears risk calls ambition immoral. A culture that lacks greatness calls greatness toxic. This is how weakness becomes morally superior, not through courage, but through inversion. In slave morality, the oppressed do not seek liberation through strength. They seek moral revenge through the redefinition of virtue. They say, I do not want power, and therefore power must be bad. I cannot win, and therefore victory must be corrupt. I am small, and therefore smallness is holy. But there is no virtue in powerlessness, not unless it is chosen, not unless it contains the will to transform. Otherwise, it is simply bitterness painted in gold. And yet, this bitterness now runs the world. Guilt, the invisible leash, slave morality, does not need chains. It uses something far more effective, guilt. It teaches you to internalize your leash, to patrol your own soul. When you feel pride, it whispers, that's arrogance. When you desire more, it says, that's selfish. When you speak your truth, it warns, that's offensive. And so you shrink, you kneel, you apologize for your strength, you fear your own light. Guilt becomes the inner tyrant, and the noble spirit, the part of you that dares to rise, is strangled in silence. This is not morality, this is psychological warfare. How society rewards submission as virtue. Walk through the world today and observe who is praised, who is lifted up as moral good on the right side of history. It is the compliant, the agreeable, the harmless. Society does not want lions. It wants livestock. It feeds you rules, rewards your docility, and calls that progress. But real progress does not come from agreement. It comes from collision, from the friction of ideas, from the wildness of individuals refusing to be caged. Nietzsche mourned a world that punished the noble spirit, that took the fire of the few and buried it under the snow of the many. But he also whispered a secret, that somewhere in you, beneath the guilt, the conformity, the lies, the noble spirit still breathes. It is not dead, just dormant. And when it wakes, it will no longer ask to be good. It will rise to become real, approval seeking as existential betrayal. You want to be liked. You want to be accepted. You want to be told you're a good person, but at what cost? Every time you silence your instincts to fit in, you abandon yourself. Every time you nod in agreement while your soul screams, no, you fracture. Every time you betray your truth for approval, you become hollow. Nietzsche saw this craving for validation not as harmless, but as a spiritual disease. The need to be accepted by the herd is the need to be owned by it. To seek constant approval is to live by mirrors, always looking outward, never inward. And mirrors lie. So you end up reshaping yourself again and again, like clay, until nothing of your original fire remains, and they will clap for your sacrifice. They will call it maturity, kindness, humility, but what they are really celebrating is your defeat. Empathy as a mask for fear. We are told that empathy is sacred, that it is the highest virtue, that to feel others' pain is moral. But Nietzsche asked, is all empathy pure, or is some of it fear in disguise? Sometimes empathy is a refusal to confront strength. Sometimes it is the weapon of those who dare not speak truth, who silence the powerful by calling them unfeeling. In a world ruled by herd values, emotions are not shared. They are used to guilt, to manipulate, to dilute the sharp edges of truth. You're not allowed to be fierce. because that might hurt someone's feelings. You're not allowed to shine because that might make someone else feel small. So you dim yourself, you soften your voice, you abandon your clarity, not out of love, but out of fear. This is not empathy, it's spiritual self-erasure. Why mediocrity is celebrated. Watch closely. The exceptional are mocked, the ambitious are shamed, the daring are suspected, but the average, the obedient, the emotionally safe, they are rewarded with likes, applause, praise. This is no accident. It is the silent agreement of the herd. Let no one rise too high, for they remind us of what we have refused to become. So we celebrate the small. We confuse politeness for depth. We label discomfort as toxicity. We canonize mediocrity and call it justice. But Nietzsche burned through this illusion. He said, "Let the mediocre hate the noble. It is their only defense." And so they build a world in their image, not to inspire the spirit, but to flatten it. And if you do not conform, they will not understand you. They will call you dangerous because you are. The lonely path of those who refuse the herd, to walk away from herd values, is not glamorous. It is lonely, it is quiet. It is filled with nights of doubt, exile, and internal war, but it is real. You stop seeking applause. You stop needing to be understood. You begin to build a life that reflects your truth, not their approval. And this is where your strength begins. Not when you dominate others, but when you refuse to be dominated by their expectations. You will lose comfort. You will lose community. You will even lose the self you once were, but you will gain something far greater: integrity, fire, becoming. So let them misunderstand you. Let them call you cold, arrogant, unfeeling. Because in a world that celebrates weakness, strength will always look like heresy. Strength without apology. There is a kind of strength that is not loud, not violent, not boastful. It is quiet, focused, alive. It moves through the world unapologetically, not asking for validation, not demanding permission, and yet this is the very strength the world fears most. Because it cannot be guilted, it cannot be bribed, it cannot be controlled. You were born with a spark of it, but you were taught to hide it, taught to smile instead of challenge, to soften your voice, to make yourself less threatening, less you. This is the great betrayal. Not that others forced you to be weak, but that you agreed. And now the time has come to unlearn that lie, to take back your flame, to stop apologizing for your fire, not to use it to burn others, but to light the way. Virtue redefined as self-overcoming. What if true virtue is not being nice, but being brave? What if it's not compliance, but creation? Nietzsche didn't reject morality. He rejected borrowed morality. The kind that asks you to be obedient, to follow inherited rules without question. In its place, he offered something harder and holier: self-overcoming. The ability to transform your instincts, your shadows, your chaos, not by repressing them, but by integrating them. This is not suppression, this is alchemy, turning raw power into purpose, turning pain into wisdom, turning freedom into form. True virtue, then, is not about denying your nature. It is about refining it into something radiant, dangerous, real. The will to power versus the will to please. There are two forces inside you. One wants to rise, to expand, to create. It is raw, primal, electric. Nietzsche called it the will to power, the sacred urge to become more than what you were. The other wants to please, to be liked, to fit in, to feel safe. It is the voice that says, don't make waves, be nice, stay small. And these two cannot coexist. One must kneel to the other. If you live to please, you will betray your power. If you live to rise, you will upset the herd. But only one path leads to soul. So ask yourself, do you want to be loved or do you want to be free? Choosing creation over compliance. Every day, you have a choice: to comply or to create. Compliance is safe. Creation is dangerous. To create your life, your truth, your art, your path, is to step into the unknown without a map. It means disobeying what they told you was good. It means redefining virtue from the inside out. But only through creation do you become sovereign. You stop living as a reflection. You start living as a source. This is what Nietzsche meant by the Übermensch, not a tyrant, but a creator of values. One who says, I no longer live by their morality, I forge my own. And in that act, you do not become immoral, you become untamed, and the world will tremble, not because you are evil, but because you are no longer theirs. The birth of your own values. You were not meant to inherit your values like furniture passed down from dead relatives. You were meant to forge them. The moment you stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what do I choose to become? That is the birth of your sovereignty. Nietzsche called it the revaluation of all values, a violent act of inner clarity, a rebellion not against others, but against the outdated voices within you. You stop parroting borrowed ethics. You stop living by the fears of your parents, your teachers, your tribe. You begin to build your morality like an artist builds a sculpture with blood, fire, truth, no longer obedient, no longer borrowed, only yours. And in that terrifying freedom, you become real. Courage as sacred rebellion. You don't need more opinions, you need more courage. Courage to speak when silence is rewarded. Courage to act when hesitation is safer. Courage to be seen fully, rawly, unapologetically. This kind of courage is not comfortable. It is sacred rebellion, because it is rebellion against the most subtle tyrant of all, the part of you that still wants to be liked. The world teaches you to flinch, to soften your voice, to be agreeable. But every time you override that instinct, every time you choose truth over approval, you reclaim a part of your soul, not to become cruel, but to become whole, rejecting inherited morality. What if everything you were taught to admire was a lie? What if patience, selflessness, obedience, the so-called virtues, were planted in you not to free you, but to tame you? Nietzsche invites you not to become immoral, but to rise above morality, to see it as a tool, not a truth, to hold it in your hands, examine it and say, does this serve my becoming? If not, let it burn. Let inherited morality fall away like dead skin. Let shame rot in the daylight. Let guilt become fuel for something truer. Because until you reject the morality imposed upon you, you are not living, you are being lived. The silence of the one who no longer needs to be seen. And then comes the quiet, not loneliness, but sovereignty. You no longer perform. You no longer need applause. You no longer need to justify your existence through the language of the herd. You walk differently. You speak only when it matters. You do not seek to be admired. You seek only to be true. And in that truth, in that silence, there is a kind of wild peace that no virtue can imitate. You are no longer tamed. You are no longer good. You are yourself fully, fiercely, finally. And if that self is feared by the world, let it be. Because when you stop being what they trained you to be, you become what you were born to be. And there is no greater virtue than that. You are no longer tamed. You are no longer good. You are yourself, fully, fiercely, finally. And if that self is feared by the world, let it be. Because when you stop being what they trained you to be, you become what you were born to be. There is more lies to unlearn, more fire to reclaim, more myths to tear down. So when your hunger returns, when silence no longer satisfies, follow it. The next threshold waits, and you are almost ready to cross it.